Hey guys, tonight we slide back in time into muddy boots and tin helmets as we wander through one of the less glamorous yet strangely fascinating aspects of World War II, what soldiers actually ate. You're in the field now, crouched behind a rock, rain dribbling down the back of your neck, and it's finally time for a break. You open your ration kit like it's a Christmas present, and you find a can of something beige. Welcome to the dinner table of the 1940s soldier, where powdered eggs, instant coffee, and a slab of greasy meat product called Spam are the highlights of your day. You probably won't survive this meal, honestly, not because it's dangerous, but because it's just so deeply uninspired. Still, it's food. Technically, so comma. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when people are listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit cross-legged on your rucksack, flipping open your standard-issue K-ration. The box feels lighter than you'd like, especially after a 10-mile hike through sticky mud and echoing artillery. Inside, a small can of pork loaf. It's pink, it's square, it jiggles. 4 crackers, tough enough to file your dog tags on, and a packet of powdered eggs that smell faintly of warm chalk. You're not alone in this culinary trial. American GIs were famously powered by a trio of field meals: K rations for short-term operations, C rations for the long haul, and A rations, if you were lucky enough to be near a field kitchen and not getting shelled. The K ration, designed by physiologist Ansel Keys, yes, the same guy who later gave us the Mediterranean diet, go figure, was meant to sustain troops on the move. Unfortunately, sustain is doing some heavy lifting here. You tear open the little envelope of instant coffee, tap the powder into your tin mug, and add water from your canteen. It's lukewarm, bitter, and somehow gritty, like someone strained it through a sock that saw combat. But you sip anyway, because caffeine is the closest thing to a hug out here. Historians still argue whether the K ration was ever truly intended as a long-term solution or just a temporary fix. Some say Keys wanted it used for only a couple of days. Others think the logistics just ran away with the plan. Either way, you're now on day 6 of chewing on what feels like flavor-enhanced drywall. Ah, but there's a silver lining. A tiny foil-wrapped cube labeled chewing gum. You pop it in your mouth and feel a fleeting moment of joy until it loses its flavor in under a minute and begins to disintegrate like ancient papyrus. Still, it's a ritual now. Coffee, meat, crackers, gum. Your buddy across the fire gestures with his fork, swearing that if he eats one more can of meat product that jiggles, he's going to start identifying as a vegetarian. You both laugh, dryly of course, and return to poking at your eggs. They were scrambled once in a distant dimension. Now they resemble yellow spackle with the texture of a rubber boot. You can almost imagine a USDA inspector somewhere nodding solemnly, declaring, "Yeah, that's probably food." On occasion, you get the Holy Grail, a tin of fruit cocktail, a syrupy miracle that tastes like hope and pears and whatever color maraschino cherries are. You savor each sticky cube like a king, ignoring the fact that it's probably older than your boots. In fact, some soldiers hoarded their fruit tins, not for nutrition, but for morale. A sweet spoonful on a rainy night could briefly cancel out the misery. Want quirky? Here's a tidbit. Some rations included a small sheet of toilet paper, just a few squares, enough to insult your dignity, but not clean up after it. You joke that it's probably there to be used before the meal, not after. Some guys, especially in the Pacific Theater, carry hot sauce or mustard packets pilfered from care packages or friendly locals. Anything to drown the taste of Spam, the reigning champion of mystery meat. Introduced during WWII as a cheap, shelf-stable protein, Spam became so iconic that American troops practically spammed the globe with it. Hawaii, the Philippines, and Korea still have culinary love-hate relationships with the stuff today. WWII. Soldier famously described the taste of Spam as ham that lost a bet. You nod in agreement. Even stranger, certain rations contained processed cheese spread, which came in tiny tins with an opener key. The texture was like paste, the color suspiciously neon. It didn't melt, didn't spoil, and probably didn't come from a cow. Yet, somehow, it became a minor obsession. Soldiers would trade cigarettes for extra tins. Others used the empty containers as makeshift stoves or cups, or mini stoves and cups, depending on your creativity and desperation. By now, your fingers are greasy, your crackers half chewed and abandoned. The powdered eggs have congealed into something you pretend not to see, and your buddy is folding the gum wrapper into a little boat. Across the fire, someone reads the tiny note inside the accessory pack. Do not use as weapon. Too late, pal. Your stomach grumbles, not out of hunger, but confusion. It's not that the food is bad exactly. It's that it tries so hard to be food and ends up somewhere between edible and evidence. You look down at the last slice of pork product, now glistening with ambient air sadness, and eat it anyway. You lean back against your gear, letting the rain ping softly against your helmet. The meal is done. The world is quiet. And somewhere, someone is making real scrambled eggs with butter. The thought is more nourishing than anything you just ate. You wake up stiff, cold, and mildly offended by your own breath. Your foxhole smells like damp wool and regret, and your stomach's already hinting that it would really like something warm, preferably edible, possibly recognizable. You stretch your limbs, brush a few clumps of mud from your collar, and make your way toward the makeshift mess line, where the scent of burning fuel and boiled despair fills the air. A steaming ladle of something lands in your mess tin with a splat. It wiggles. It's brown. Your buddy squints and says, "That used to be stew." You take a whiff and decide not to ask any follow-up questions. Welcome to Trench Toast and Mystery Stew, two cornerstones of field cuisine that somehow endured multiple wars and none of your digestive system's standards. You're in Europe now, somewhere cold and bleak and with just enough shellfire in the distance to make you jump when a spoon clangs. This morning's toast is actually a hunk of rock-hard bread that's been lightly warmed on a canteen cup. It's stale enough to be retro. You gnaw one corner and immediately regret your dental history. British soldiers called this hardtack, though it goes by many names: dog biscuits, molar breakers, boredom in bread form. Technically, it's food. Emotionally, it's a test. Still, you dunk it in the stew, letting it soak until it's mushy enough not to chip a tooth. The stew, if you're feeling generous, contains meat, maybe beef, possibly rabbit, or, according to one rumor circulating in your unit, horse. Historians still argue whether battlefield meat sources were more pragmatic than official records let on. One soldier swore he saw a cook accept a wagon load of off-cuts from a nearby farm and didn't ask too many questions. You eat anyway. Hunger makes pragmatists of everyone. The stew also contains some vegetables, or what's left of them. There's a potato chunk that looks like it traveled from 1917, a slice of carrot that's more orange adjacent than orange, and something green that you poke 3 times before deciding it's probably cabbage. Maybe, could be a sock. Field kitchens tried their best. Often nothing more than a trailer or a tent with a huge metal stove. These mobile canteens ran on condensed ingredients and hope. Water. Meat. A few root vegetables, salt, and a spice packet the size of a thimble. Sometimes, meals came from tins opened hours in advance. Other times, cooks tossed whatever they had into a single bubbling cauldron, stirred it with a stick, and called it a day. You eat it while trying not to wonder how clean that stick is. As you sip the lukewarm broth, someone behind you jokes that at least it's not British rations. They've got something called pea soup with ham flavoring, though the ham is more of a haunting than an ingredient. Another guy from down the line says the Canadians have maple-flavored sausage mush, which sounds like it should be good but isn't. Quirky detail time. During a particularly weird winter in Italy, one American unit discovered a cache of old Roman amphorae buried beneath their camp, and some genius decided to cook stew in them for luck. The result? A weirdly chalky, vaguely ancient-tasting mess that gave half the men gas and the other half something worse. You finish your meal and wipe your tin out with a crust of bread. Dishwashing isn't really an option when you're mobile, and every soldier becomes part raccoon after a while, always foraging for something cleanish to eat with. Someone pulls out a ration biscuit that they've been saving for a bad day, which this clearly is. It's beige. It's dry. It comes with a single pat of congealed butter wrapped in wax paper. You share it anyway, breaking the biscuit into tiny, dusty chunks like it's the Eucharist of mediocrity. You drink water from your canteen. It's metallic tasting and barely above freezing. But hydration is sacred, even if the water tablets make it taste like a swimming pool. One guy uses his water ration to make field coffee, essentially hot water, with a few stray granules of instant stirred in. He sips it like a connoisseur, and insists it tastes better when you cry a little while drinking it. Around you, soldiers trade bites and barbs. "This stew's got the texture of a wet sponge," someone mutters. "Better than last week's potato surprise," another replies. "That surprise was diarrhea," the first guy deadpans. You laugh, but softly. It's all part of the routine now. Mess tins get stacked, and someone starts burning the trash. Paper, food scraps, maybe a few unlucky socks. You rub your hands over the flames, letting the warmth seep into your fingers. You can still taste the meal, but just barely. It's not the flavor that sticks, it's the ritual. You'll eat the same thing tomorrow, and the next day, until your taste buds mutiny or you finally get transferred near a supply depot. There's talk of a holiday dinner. Christmas, maybe. A few crates of real turkey, cranberry jelly, even pie, if the logistics gods smile. One guy's already started composing letters to home describing the feast in great, totally exaggerated detail. "I'm gonna say I had steak and 2 types of gravy," he says. let my mom picture me as a king. You lean back, foolish and tired, staring at the pale, cloudy sky. A cold breeze runs down your collar like a wet finger. A few feet away, someone's humming. The sound mixes with the soft clink of metal cups and the rustling of tarps. This life, mud, metal, mystery stew, isn't what you signed up for, but it's yours now. Every bite of food, no matter how weird, is a tiny thread tying you to home, to normalcy, to tomorrow. You lie down again in your foxhole. Somewhere behind your eyelids, the stew still simmers, and your brain tries to decide whether you're comforted or confused. Probably both dot you. Wake to a quiet crunch, not enemy fire, thankfully, just frost hardening the edges of your blanket and biting at your boots. You wiggle your toes to make sure they're still there. They are, mostly. The Ardennes is a freezer masquerading as a forest, and you're smack in the middle of it, tucked in between trees that look like they gave up back in October. You sit up slowly, joints cracking like old door hinges, and pat your chest and pocket. There it is, the beloved tin of beans. Cold beans. Possibly sent from the U.S. before you were even drafted. You pop the lid with a knife and are immediately hit by a waft of tomato-scented melancholy. This, right here, is breakfast in the Battle of the Bulge. A frozen can of pork and beans, eaten with your fingers because your utensils are too cold to touch. The beans slide out in a reluctant clump, and the pork chunk inside has the consistency of a racer. You chew anyway. You have to. It's the only warm memory your body's going to get today. C rations were supposed to be an upgrade from K rations. More variety, more calories, more meat-adjacent items. But in the brutal winter of 1944, they might as well have issued ice cubes and a hug. The can barely warms in your hands, even after you try holding it near the tiny flame of a heating tablet. The air is so cold that your breath freezes mid-sigh. Historians still argue whether the Allied High Command underestimated the toll of winter logistics, or if the chaos of the German offensive simply overran even the best-laid chow lines. Whatever the truth, all you know is that your fingers are stiff, your lips are cracked, and your beans are only slightly less frozen than your boots. And yet, somehow, they taste fine. Maybe it's the hunger. Or maybe your standards have eroded to, is it not actively hurting me? Either way, you finish the can and wipe your hands on your jacket. No napkins in the Ardennes. Your buddy's got a can of meat hash. He opens it, sniffs it, shrugs, and eats it cold. Tastes like regret, he says, mouth full. Regret and someone else's dog food. You nod in agreement, though you're secretly jealous. It smells like it might once have been warm. There were 3 meals in a standard C ration pack: breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Each came in olive drab tins labeled with military precision and zero charm. Meat and beans, ham and lima beans, chopped ham and eggs. You remember the first time you saw ham and lima beans, how optimistic you were? Now, it's known among troops as ham and mother redacted beans, a meal so reviled it could cause actual unit morale damage. But cold as it is, some still try to elevate the experience. One guy carries a tiny bottle of Tabasco from a home package. Another collects melted snow in a helmet to make weak tea. Someone tried to warm beans by sticking the can under their armpit. He was committed, but not successful. You hear a rumor from down the line about a unit that cooked over engine blocks. they'd pop the hood of a Jeep, place a can right on the hot metal, and let the machine do the work. Desperate times call for creative thermodynamics. Another story claims a tank crew once fried eggs on the armor plating. No one knows where they got the eggs. Possibly sorcery. Quirky moment incoming. One GI claimed he cracked a can of pork and eggs that had somehow fermented, giving it a weirdly fizzy texture. He dared his buddy to eat it for a pack of Lucky Strikes. The buddy did, then spent 3 days in a field hospital, with what the medic described as culinary betrayal. The cold isn't just uncomfortable, it changes everything. Your rations freeze solid. The tin won't open unless heated or stabbed. Chocolate bars become brick-like hazards. Even your crackers shatter like glass when dropped. And forget about heating water. You'd have better luck negotiating with the ice. Somehow, the Germans are eating sauerkraut. You find an abandoned mess area after a skirmish and discover tins of actual cooked cabbage, still warm from a fire someone had to leave in a hurry. You and your squad share the loot like pirates, marveling at the tangy, sour taste of actual flavor. Food becomes the measure of civilization. Warmth becomes an act of defiance. A hot meal, even just once a week, is enough to make you feel human again. So you cling to those tiny moments. A half-melted chocolate bar, a cup of broth, a heated can of meat stew eaten cross-legged on the snow like some weird holiday dinner with 10 of your closest half-frozen friends. And still, someone cracks a joke. "Hey," says a voice from behind a snow-covered log. "You think they'll serve turkey if we take Berlin by Christmas?" You all laugh. Not because it's likely, but because it's better than crying into your beanstalk. By now, your body is adjusting. Your stomach has given up expecting flavor. Your brain stops questioning textures. And your heart clings to the idea that somewhere, beyond this frozen nightmare, there's a diner with hot coffee and eggs that don't require a chisel. You crawl back into your hole in the earth, can now empty and serving as an improvised candle holder. The small flicker glows just enough to see your breath. Tomorrow will bring more snow, more marching, more mystery meat. But tonight, you're full, kind of, and weirdly comforted by the shared suffering of hundreds of thousands of soldiers just like you. Cold, tired, and carrying half their diet in their coat pockets. The war grinds on, but so does dinner. Your boots squelch through something that's either a puddle or someone's failed attempt at a soup. You don't want to know. The war has shifted again. You're not freezing anymore, but you're not warm either. Just stuck in that damp, lukewarm purgatory where everything smells like mildew and your socks will never dry. It's noon, or close enough, and your stomach starts sending increasingly dramatic hunger signals. The kind that whisper, "Surely it's time for steak by now," but you know better. You open your pack and find your lunch, a K-ration lunch unit, wrapped in waxed cardboard like a sad Christmas present. Inside, a tin of processed cheese spread, 4 rock-solid crackers, a fruit bar that looks like compressed raisins revenge, a small pack of chewing gum, and, glory be, a tiny packet of instant coffee. It's like a gift basket curated by someone who's never eaten food. But still, you open each item like it's treasure. The cheese spread comes in a round can, and if you squint, it almost resembles food. You jab a hole in it with your knife and try to squeeze some out onto a cracker. It moves with the enthusiasm of industrial glue, but eventually it succumbs. You take a bite. It's salty. Very salty. Possibly illegal in 5 countries. But you keep eating. Partly out of hunger, and partly because you now feel personally challenged by the cracker. The K ration was supposed to be portable, calorie-packed, and morale-sustaining. It was meant for short-term field use. But, like that one party guest who never leaves, it overstayed its welcome. Soldiers carried K rations through long campaigns, and by the 5th day of cheese and crackers, they weren't just tired. They were betrayed. You chew slowly. The crackers flake like dry plaster, and the cheese tries to escape. You glance over at your buddy who's trying to rehydrate the fruit bar with spit. "Gotta make it edible somehow," he says, grimacing. You nod in solidarity. Hydration and desperation. Nature's seasoning. Still, you're grateful. There's food. There's gum. There's even a tiny beige rectangle labeled cigarettes. You don't smoke, but you trade it to another guy for his chocolate bar. It's the economy of the field. Everything has value, especially sugar and caffeine. A man once swapped his entire K ration for 1 can of peaches. "Worth it," he said, licking the juice from his fingers. Quirky detail time. There's a persistent rumor that a unit in the Pacific once received an entire shipment of K rations that had been stored next to crates of soap. Everything tasted faintly of lavender and despair. One soldier allegedly began hallucinating bubble baths mid-patrol. But back to your lunch. The gum is spearmint. Hard at first, but merciful after a few chews. It cuts through the taste of tinned cheese and reminds you briefly of home. A diner in Indiana. A drive-in burger joint in California. A bagged lunch your mom packed when you were 10. All of it feels 1,000 miles away, which, in truth, it is. You sip water from your canteen, then prep the instant coffee. The packet reads, Type 1, soluble. You pour the brown dust into your canteen cup, add tepid water from a heated mess tin, and stir it with a twig. The result is convincing. It smells like coffee. It's slightly bitter. It wakes you up just enough to remember how tired you are. K rations came in 3 types: breakfast, lunch, and supper, and each had a different contents, though the cheese and cracker combo was tragically common. The breakfast unit usually offered canned meat or eggs, a fruit bar, a packet of powdered lemonade, why, and a chunk of compressed cereal. The cereal was as dense as ambition and slightly less nutritious. You remember one guy who actually liked the K rations. Efficient, he called them. No nonsense. He also once tried to heat his cheese spread with a magnifying glass and spent an hour chasing sunlight. So, maybe not your go-to food critic. Historians still argue whether the K ration was a well-meaning innovation or a culinary crime against humanity. It had its perks: compact, calorie-dense, shelf-stable. But after 2 weeks straight, it became less convenient and more psychological warfare. And then there's the meat. Every few meals you get a tin of something vaguely meaty. Chopped ham and eggs, deviled ham, or the notorious meat product. They all come in the same color, canned tan. Texture varies from gelatinous to chalky. Taste ranges from bland to betrayed by science. Once, someone in your unit compared meat product to a sock soaked in salt water and left under a radiator. Accurate. Another time, someone fried their meat tin contents on a hot mess kit lid. The resulting sizzle attracted 6 men, 1 dog, and a passing tank. Everyone wanted a bite, even the tank crew. Now, imagine this. You're sitting under a rain-drenched tarp, chewing meat paste from a spoon, rainwater running down your back, and all you can think is, man, I miss real food. A burger, eggs, warm toast. Anything that doesn't come in a can and require a P38 can opener. The tiny key-shaped tool every soldier clung to like a religious relic. You wrap up your K-ration meal by folding the cardboard box back into your pack. Trash isn't just trash out here. It's weight. You carry it until the next burn pit or field dump, because nothing says war like rationing. Not just food, but garbage disposal. But here's the weird thing. You get used to it. The crackers, the paste, the gum. You even start developing preferences. Some guys hoard the canned cheese like it's gold. Others will fight you for the chocolate D-bar, even though it tastes like cocoa-flavored soap. You lean back against your gear, foolish again. The taste of industrial dairy still coating your tongue. A guy nearby is humming something. Sounds like Glenn Miller, or maybe it's just hunger hallucinations. You close your eyes for a second, letting the dull ache of marching settle into your bones. Lunch is over. War resumes, but for a little while, the world was just cheese, crackers, and questionable coffee. You're somewhere in Italy now. Your uniform stained with the dust of ancient roads and olive groves that somehow keep growing despite the shell fire. The sun is relentless. It's not the warm, cozy sun you dream of back home, but the kind that bakes your helmet, melts your chocolate, and turns your canteen into a sad thermos of bathwater. Today's treat is an A ration, or so you've been told. You raise an eyebrow because you're still in a combat zone, and A rations are supposed to be real food, prepared by real cooks using fresh ingredients in actual kitchens. What you've got, however, is a steaming aluminum tray handed to you from the back of a converted truck. It smells edible. You don't ask too many questions. You shuffle forward in line, mess kit in hand, watching the cook slop ladles of thick brown stew into trays. There's bread, too, actual bread, softish and warm from the heat lamp. It's the first slice you've seen that didn't come vacuum-sealed in despair. A miracle. The guy behind you whispers, "Hope it's beef, and not whatever they found by the road." Turns out it is beef stew, or a reasonable impression of it. Chunks of meat, bits of carrot and potato, and a gravy that coats your throat like glue. But it's hot, and it's got flavor. And, best of all, it's not in a can. You sit down on a patch of shade beside a stone wall, balancing your mess kit on your knees, and dig in. A rations are the holy grail of soldier meals. They mean the supply line is working. They mean you're close enough to something resembling a kitchen. They mean that, for a short, glorious window, the military system is capable of serving food that doesn't require a crowbar to open. A rations vary depending on what the quartermasters can scrape together. In the Pacific, it might be fried rice or fish. In Europe, expect things like scrambled eggs, spaghetti with meat sauce, or the fabled roast beef. Once, in a French village, your unit stumbled upon a mobile field kitchen that was serving pork chops with real mashed potatoes. It was like biting into peace. Quirky footnote. Some units created unofficial menus, giving the meals code names or colorful nicknames. A particularly gray version of sausage and sauerkraut became known as trench worms. Meatloaf with gravy, ammo cake. You once had something called victory hash, which looked like the aftermath of a grenade and tasted like salt's angrier cousin. You tear into the bread. It's slightly stale, but gloriously chewy. Someone nearby pulls out a jar of jam, a care package from home, and spreads it on a hunk of crust. He offers you a bite. You say yes, obviously. It's strawberry, sweet and sticky, a taste that almost brings tears to your eyes. Actual fruit flavor. In this economy, you finish the meal with a small can of peaches, served chilled over crushed ice from the medic's cooler. How? You don't ask. Probably smuggled, definitely rationed, but incredibly real. You savor each slice, letting the juice drip down your chin like you're at a 4th of July picnic instead of crouched beside a battered wall in occupied territory. A rations aren't just meals, they're events. They require logistics, roads, trucks, fuel, planning, and, most elusive of all, time. You don't always get them. When you do, you eat with reverence, like each spoonful might be your last, because it might. Historians still argue whether the military invested enough in morale food, those hot, fresh meals that kept soldiers from unraveling completely. Some say the effort was heroic. Others claim it was sporadic at best, more about optics than nutrition. You don't know. You just know that hot stew tastes like hope. One guy in your unit claims his uncle worked at a base kitchen and sent him a recipe for the official Army meatloaf. It involves 6 pounds of ground beef, a loaf of stale bread, and 3 pounds of ketchup. Another swears he bribed a cook once to make pancakes using flour smuggled from a French bakery. Best war crime I ever committed, he says, laughing. Another moment of oddity. Someone once swapped their A-ration dessert, chocolate pudding, for a pair of socks. The logic: you can't eat pudding if your feet fall off from trench foot. Fair enough. Sometimes you eat standing. Sometimes you sit in the dirt. Sometimes a local villager offers you a seat at their rickety table, complete with a bottle of something strong and a bowl of homemade pasta. You accept, every time, because food is universal, and the war hasn't taken everything from everyone. Not yet. After meals, you clean your mess kit with sand and a splash of water. No sponges, no soap, just a quick scrape and wipe. Then back into your bag. You pack up your gear, feeling slightly more human, slightly less starved, slightly more ready to trudge on through another dusty hill or crumbling town. Someone's singing again. It's always the same guy. Today it's "Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree." He's off-key, but no one tells him to stop. Because when your belly's full, at least partly, you can afford to let a little music in. And somewhere, in the back of your mind, you start to imagine what a post-war dinner might look like. No mess kits, no lines, no powdered anything. Just a plate, a fork, and maybe, if you're lucky, a slice of apple pie that wasn't canned in 1942. You don't dare say it out loud, but you think it. Food this good must mean something. That the end isn't so far away. That maybe tomorrow's meal will taste even better. Maybe dot your boots crunch on something frozen. Again. Gravel, ice, a mix of the two. The cold has teeth now, gnawing at your ankles, fingers, even your nose, which is leaking like it missed the memo that dignity still matters. You're in the Ardennes. Winter. which, to be clear, is less winter wonderland and more frozen misery simulator. It's foxhole weather. The kind where you sleep in shifts, wrapped in every piece of clothing you own, while snow sneaks in through every gap and crack in your shelter. And when morning comes, you're not woken by birdsong or sunshine, but by your stomach, which is now organizing protests in your rib cage. You rummage through your pack for a ration, likely a C ration this time. No A rations out here. The field kitchen is long gone, probably stuck behind an icy ridge or abandoned after yet another retreat. You unwrap the familiar dull green tin. It's dented. It's cold. It says, "Beans with Frankfurters." You sigh. Again. C rations are technically cooked, canned, and ready to eat. Technically. The reality is a can that refuses to open in the cold, a meal that tastes like it lost a bet, and a spoon so cold it tries to weld itself to your tongue. You use your P38 can opener, nicknamed the John Wayne because only he could make it look easy, and pry the lid open. Inside is a beige-orange stew of beans, sausage slices, and despair. You scoop it out, one frozen bite at a time. It's better when hot, but there's no fire allowed. Not here. Smoke draws attention, and attention out here comes in the form of mortars and machine gun fire. The worst part? The fat congeals. It forms this gelatinous layer that stares back at you like it knows you're going to eat it anyway. You try to psych yourself up. "Protein," you whisper, stabbing at it with a spoon like it might get up and leave. But you eat it because there's nothing else. C rations came in 12 menu items, rotated like a cruel lottery. Some were tolerable: spaghetti with meat, ham and lima beans, aka ham and mothers, even chopped ham and eggs if you held your nose. But the worst, the scrambled eggs, cold, lumpy, sulfurous, like a mistake someone made in a lab and accidentally shipped to Europe. Quirky side fact: some soldiers figured out you could place an unopened can of beans under your armpit for 20 minutes to warm it. Others tried to strap cans to tank engines or rest them inside helmets left near exhaust vents. Anything to avoid eating food colder than your morale. Alongside the entree tin came the accessory packet. This included toilet paper, a postage stamp-sized sheet of optimism, chewing gum, cigarettes, matches, sugar, salt, and sometimes, just sometimes, a chocolate disc. That disc was gold, even if it tasted like candle wax with a cocoa complex. You remember once trading your entire C ration for someone's fruit cocktail tin. It had real cherries. You almost cried. Then again, the fruit cocktail often came with a film of metallic aftertaste, like it had been preserved with spite. C rations were designed for combat zones. No fire, no preparation, just open and eat. But the calorie count didn't always match the physical demand. Marching through knee-deep snow burns more than a can of beans can give. So you ration your energy, your steps, even your thoughts. Thinking too hard uses warmth. Historians still argue whether the C ration's logistical convenience justified its taste crimes. Some insist it saved lives by keeping troops nourished on the move. Others believe the psychological cost of repeated cold hash was underestimated. It's the culinary equivalent of a ceasefire. Necessary, but nobody really likes it. Sometimes you and the guys would try to get creative. Mix crackers into the beans. Heat the can on a warm rifle barrel. Add powdered coffee to the chocolate bar and pretend it's a mocha. One guy, a former line cook in Detroit, carried a mini spice kit in his sock. Salt, pepper, paprika. His seasoned sea ration tasted like gourmet food. He became a legend. But most days you eat quietly. You sit in your hole, back against the frozen earth, and try to make peace with whatever flavor the army gods have dealt today. You chew slowly, watching snow settle on the edges of your helmet, thinking about your mom's cooking. Lasagna, chicken dumplings, pie. You'd sell your rifle for pie. Every once in a while, a care package arrives from home, if the mail system survives the weather and the chaos. You tear it open with the same desperation you'd reserve for a winning lottery ticket. Inside, cookies, hard as bullets, but still cookies. Jerky, sweet, and smoky. Maybe even a tin of coffee or a tiny bottle of something not exactly regulation. One time, someone's aunt sent an entire fruitcake. Dense, indestructible, and filled with what might be real fruit. You all took turns gnawing on it like cavemen discovering carbs. Your buddy nudges you and shares a cracker smeared with peanut butter from his ration. It's almost good. The texture's weird, half powder, half glue, but the salt and fat are just what your brain craves. For a few moments you both chew and stare at the icy horizon, not speaking. There's nothing to say. The peanut butter speaks for itself, and the coffee. You never skip the coffee. Powdered, bitter, more mood stabilizer than beverage. You mix it with lukewarm water in your canteen cup, stir with a stick, and sip it like it's a $5 latte. It wakes you just enough to remember how tired you are. You sigh. That's the best you can hope for today. The snow's coming down harder now, blanketing everything in cold silence. You brush it off your mess kit and stack your trash, careful not to leave a trace. Foxholes don't need smells. You bury the rest, pack up, and get ready to move. Somewhere else, somewhere not quite as cold maybe, but probably not Dot. You sling your rifle over your shoulder and stand up, boots cracking through frost. One more sea ration down. 1,000 more to go. You're walking again, because that's what you do. Through mud, snow, sand, sometimes ankle-deep water. Boots squelching with every tired step, shoulders aching beneath your gear. And in your pack, somewhere between the spare socks and the mystery stain on your poncho, sits a K-ration. Or 2, if you're lucky. K-rations are your everyday, all-purpose, calorie-packed companions. They're like that one friend who always shows up when nobody else does. Reliable. A little boring, often disappointing, but necessary. Designed for mobility, meant for short missions, and packed like a high-stakes lunchbox, these rations are what to keep you going when there's no kitchen in sight, and no time to stop. The box is slim, cardboard, the size of a paperback novel. Each day's rations are divided into 3 meals: breakfast, dinner, supper, though calling them meals is generous. You open the breakfast pack, and inside, canned ham and eggs, a packet of crackers, instant coffee, 4 sugar cubes, a D-bar chocolate block, and, you smile, chewing gum. You start with the ham and eggs, which look suspiciously like cat food and smell only marginally better. You use your P38 to pry the lid off, and a soft flop greets you. It's gelatinous, beige, and trembling in the cold. Still, you eat it. alternating bites with sips of lukewarm coffee you stirred with the same spoon you used for the ham. Because hygiene is more of a vibe out here. The crackers are better. Stale, dry, but satisfyingly crunchy. You spread on a smear of processed cheese from a tiny tin. It smells like a mix of foot and miracle. But it's salty, it coats your mouth, and it doesn't taste like despair. That's a win. Historians still argue whether the K-ration was innovative or idiotic. It was designed for paratroopers and mobile units. Light, portable, efficient. But as the war stretched on, these temporary rations became all too permanent. Soldiers ate them for weeks on end, and their bodies didn't love it. Constipation became a frequent visitor. Energy dipped, morale dipped lower. Quirky tidbit: the K-ration came with 4 cigarettes per meal. That's 12 a day. The Army really wanted you calm, if not exactly healthy. Also included a small packet of toilet paper, again, more like napkin confetti, and a wooden spoon that broke if you looked at it wrong. You chew the D-bar. It's not the kind of chocolate you dream about. It's a high-fat, high-calorie block designed not to melt under pressure, which means it also refuses to melt in your mouth. You gnaw at it like a squirrel, eventually giving up and sucking on the chunk like a piece of survival gravel. The dinner box has a meat and beans can, another cracker pack, more coffee, and an orange-flavored drink powder that fizzes if you're lucky and clumps if you're not. You mix it with your canteen water. It tastes like regret with citrus notes, but at least it's not just water. Some soldiers tried combining the drink powder with snow to make a slushie. It sounded clever until someone got mild frostbite from eating too many snowsickles. Still, you try it anyway, cautiously, and it's not bad. Cold, at least. And it makes you forget, just for a second, that your socks are soaking through again. The K-ration's biggest crime wasn't the taste. It was the monotony. Same 3 boxes, same meals, day after day. You'd start fantasizing about things you never liked before. Boiled cabbage, liver, meatloaf with raisins. Anything to break the cycle. One guy said he dreamed about a peanut butter sandwich so real he woke up chewing his blanket. Swapping rations became an art form. I'll trade you my cheese tin for your fruit bar. Throw in your drink powder and it's a deal. Whole underground economies formed around those cardboard boxes. Guys with extra rations could become local kings. And if someone had a stash of lemon powder, that man could start a nation. Occasionally, you get creative. Crumble the crackers into the beans, melt the D-bar in coffee, sprinkle salt and sugar onto ham to make poor man's bacon. It never works, but trying is half the fun. At some point, someone in your unit draws a cartoon of a K-ration box with legs and a cruel smile. It says, "I'll never leave you." You all laugh. Too hard, maybe. You open the supper box. It contains a cheese spread, more meat, a few dried prunes, and, you guessed it, more crackers. The prunes are the MVPs here. Sweet, chewy, and actual fruit. You eat them last, like dessert. Someone once told you prunes are good for digestion, which suddenly makes more sense after 5 days of cheese and dry carbs. You save the gum for nightfall. One last little ritual. The minty taste scrubs the canned meat memory from your tongue. You chew slowly, letting the flavor distract you from the cold setting in. You think about home. You wonder what your mom made for dinner. Maybe stew, or roast chicken, or nothing because rationing's tough back home too. Somewhere nearby, someone strikes a match. Cigarette smoke drifts across the bivouac. You hear a low hum. Someone's singing again. It's always the same few songs. Sentimental Journey, Lily Marlene. As time goes by, One Soldier keeps a journal, meticulously recording each day's meals. He's planning a post-war cookbook. Things you'll never eat again, recipes from the front. He's serious about it, too. Has sketches and everything. You lick the last bits of cheese off your cracker and fold up the K-ration box. You'll use it to start a fire tomorrow if it's safe. Or maybe you'll use it to line your boots. Cardboard makes for half-decent insulation, Dot. Then again, nothing truly keeps the cold out. Not when you're this tired, this hungry, this far from anything normal. But at least the box is empty. Your stomach's not. And that's enough for tonight. You lie back on your bedroll, eyes on the stars, when the clouds let you see them. And you promise yourself, someday, when this is over, you'll eat something fresh every single day. With a fork. On a plate. In a chair, Dot, and it'll taste like victory. The jungle smells different at night. Damp, rich, almost sweet, until you realize the sweetness is coming from your sweat-soaked uniform and the can of rations you just cracked open. You're somewhere in the Pacific now. Heat replaces snow, rain replaces frost, but the constant, the food still kinda sucks. You're crouched beneath a palm frond lean-to, shirt clinging to your back. Mosquitoes droning like tiny enemy aircraft. Tonight's delicacy, a field ration that's been heated by ambient humidity alone. Maybe a sea ration, if you're lucky. Maybe just a D-bar and a lot of hope. You pry open the can. It's beef stew. Not bad. Better than ham and lima beans, that's for sure. The meat chunks are chewy, the gravy's metallic, and the potatoes are technically present. But in this jungle heat, anything salty and hot enough to make you sweat even more somehow hits the spot. It's not just you out here. Marines, Army grunts, Navy corpsmen, you're all eating roughly the same unappetizing buffet of field rations, bugs, and sometimes the local cuisine. And by local, we mean the edible things the locals haven't run off with, or the mess tent hasn't deemed unsafe. Which, to be fair, is most of it. Sometimes you get creative. You've learned you can crack open a coconut with a rifle butt. It's messy, but the water inside is sweet and cleaner than whatever's in your canteen after 3 refills and 1 questionable refill station. You mix coconut water with the powdered lemonade packet. Instant jungle cocktail. Kinda. The heat makes you hungrier, thirstier, crankier. You sweat out half your calories just walking to the latrine. You've eaten so much salt-packed food your boots crunch from the sodium oozing out of your pores. And yet, you keep going, because food is fuel. And in this war, you run on fuel, not flavor. Quirky bit of trivia. Some guys tried roasting taro root on a hot rifle barrel, thinking it'd make a change from the canned mush. Instead, it exploded. Left a dent in someone's helmet, and a new campfire story for the ages. You watch a buddy unwrap a strange ration bar with Korean writing on it. Turns out it's from a captured supply cache. Rice-based, hard as brick, but sweet. He shares it, and for a few bites it feels like eating something new. That's worth more than taste. It's a mental reset. But not all local flavor is welcome. One guy, fresh from boot camp, tries to roast a frog. He calls it combat cuisine. 10 minutes later, he's vomiting behind a palm tree. You add frogs = bad to your list, right next to never trust the canned eggs. Historians still argue whether the Pacific Theater received the worst rations of the war. The climate made preservation harder. Shipping took longer, and the troops often found themselves far from any sort of field kitchen. That meant more canned meals, more repetitive menus, and more dependence on creative improvisation. Or, well, starvation. You think of the Australian soldiers you met last week. They seem to have better field food. Hard biscuits, tea, tins of bully beef. One of them handed you a packet of Vegemite. You spread it on a cracker. It tasted like sadness dipped in seawater. But you smiled anyway. It's the thought that counts. When things got really bad, the mess sergeant would dig deep into reserves and pull out the emergency D-ration bars. These were basically chocolate bricks packed with fat and vitamins, meant to keep you alive for 24 hours. Eating one was like trying to swallow a cocoa-flavored sandbag. Still, you found uses. One guy shaved it into his coffee for Choco Joe. Another guy melted it in his helmet over a candle, stirred it with a bayonet, and called it fondue. You all laughed, not because it was funny, but because you needed to. That kind of hunger lives in your head as much as your belly. There's also the malaria pills. Not food, but part of the meal routine. You take them daily. They taste like chewing on a penny wrapped in aspirin, but skipping them isn't worth it. You've seen the fever hit. It turns strong men into ghosts in 24 hours. Tonight's dessert is a can of fruit cocktail, if you saved it. Sweet syrup, real fruit chunks, and the occasional cherry. You savor each bite, rationing the sweetness like it's your last. The sugar wakes something up in you. For a moment, you don't feel the bites, the heat, or the stench of mildew in your gear. Someone nearby starts boiling coffee with rainwater in a helmet over a sterno flame. It smells burnt, but comforting. You cup your hands around the tin mug and sip slowly. It scalds your tongue, and you love it. You'd give up a whole meal just for the warmth. A pack of wild pigs screeches somewhere in the jungle, followed by laughter. Probably a patrol team tossing scraps again. The local animals are getting bold. One even tried to run off with someone's boots last week. You check your socks. Still damp. You'll sleep in them anyway. Maybe your feet will dry before morning. Doubtful. Dot food out here is never just food. It's a memory trigger, a morale booster, a conversation starter. You remember someone telling you about how their dad used to cook Sunday pancakes with bacon grease. You dream of pancakes sometimes. Hot, fluffy, soaked in syrup. You wake up chewing your own cheek. Out here, even bad food means you're alive. You share it, trade it, joke about it, and curse it. But you never waste it. Every can you finish is one step closer to home. One more day survived. One more reason to keep going. You clean out the tin with a scrap of hard bread. Tuck the wrapper into your pack and lie back on your mat. The jungle buzzes around you. Frogs, birds, distant shouting, and that constant thrum of insects who seem more efficient than your entire command structure. And as you close your eyes, belly half full and mind swimming with memories of syrup and salt, you remind yourself, someday you'll eat real food again, with clean hands, off a plate, in a kitchen, with nobody shooting at you that maybe even pancakes. You're back in Europe now. The air smells colder, sharper, like wet wool and distant smoke. It's early 1945, and you're somewhere near the Rhine. And, once again, you're hungry. Of course you are. That's sort of the ongoing theme here. But today is different. You see, today there's a cook, a real one, with a field kitchen. Not just a can opener and a prayer, but an actual tent with steaming pots, a line of bleary-eyed soldiers waiting their turn, and the distant, holy promise of something that might, just might, contain gravy. Field kitchens were mobile miracles. They rolled behind the front lines in trucks or trailers, carrying enormous vats, bulk ingredients, and a couple of guys who could transform military-grade flour and dehydrated meat into something vaguely edible, and occasionally weirdly delicious. You approach the line, mess kit in hand. The smells hit you first. Beef, onions, something sweet baking off to the side. Could it be? Could this be the elusive hot meal you've heard so much about? When your turn comes, the cook, a broad-shouldered man with a spoon tucked behind one ear, slops a scoop of beef and noodles onto your tray. It's greasy, steaming, and smells like heaven. Next, a ladle of watery peas. You don't even mind. There's color on your plate. Actual green. You're practically dining in Technicolor. Then, wonder of wonders. A chunk of apple cobbler. Real fruit. Real crust. It jiggles when it lands. You hold your tray like it's made of gold and shuffle off to sit on a fallen log, savoring every bite like a critic at a five-star restaurant that only serves everything lukewarm. Quirky tidbit. Some field cooks carried small jars of spices they brought from home. Oregano, paprika, even garlic powder. They guarded them like precious contraband, using just a pinch to elevate a bland stew or a batch of hardtack dumplings into something worth remembering. You sit there, steam rising off your tray, and for a few minutes you forget the wet socks and the constant sound of distant artillery. You're just a guy eating something that tastes, almost, like it came from a kitchen, not a lab. But even these little luxuries come with challenges. For one, timing. The field kitchen could only be set up when the area was safe-ish, which wasn't often. And sometimes, just as the meal was ready, an order would come down. Move out, now. Soldiers would grab what they could and eat on the run. Hot stew sloshing in their helmets. Historians still argue whether these hot meals had any real strategic impact. Some say they saved morale. Others think they were just a temporary boost, a band-aid on a bullet wound. But for the men eating them, there's no debate. A warm plate of food meant someone cared, even if just enough to boil potatoes dot. You glance around. A few guys are trading bites, arguing over whether the cobbler has actual cinnamon in it. Someone swears he found a raisin. Another guy says it was a fly. They laugh, too tired to care. Nearby, a corporal is cooking something over a campfire with suspicious enthusiasm. Turns out his mother sent him a care package with dried mushrooms and a block of Parmesan. He's making what he calls combat risotto with sea-ration rice, water from his canteen, and half a stick of butter lifted from the field kitchen. You don't ask how he got it. That's the thing about soldiers. Give them long enough in the field, and they turn into chefs, chemists, and occasionally black market entrepreneurs. One guy in your unit somehow acquired a Dutch waffle iron and makes crude waffles with powdered eggs and flour. They taste like roof shingles but smell like Sunday morning. Even when the meals are decent, the utensils are not. You eat with a dull aluminum spoon, scraped so thin by months of use it's basically a spork with trust issues. Some guys carve their own handles out of scrap wood. Others just eat with their fingers. Napkins? That's what your sleeves are for. Then there's the hygiene. You try not to think about it. The cooks wash the pots in whatever water they can find. Sometimes snow, sometimes puddles. Once, after a surprise inspection, they switched to actual boiled water for a week. You all got diarrhea anyway. But hey, tradition is tradition. Still, comma. Despite it all, the memories of these rare, real meals stick with you. Not because they were fancy, but because they were a break. A small square of comfort in an otherwise very rectangular, very miserable situation. You remember one snowy night when the kitchen managed to whip up meatloaf? Meatloaf? You'd never liked meatloaf before, but that night it tasted like victory. Especially with the watery mashed potatoes that somehow miraculously had real butter on top. Or maybe it was lard. Honestly, who cares? Someone plays a harmonica in the distance. The cobbler's long gone, and you're licking your spoon like it owes you money. You lean back, belly full, eyelids heavy. You'd offer to help with cleanup, but no one ever takes you up on it, and, let's be honest, you weren't really offering Dot. The cook yells something about second helpings. You all bolt up like prairie dogs. The guy with the sprained ankle suddenly sprints. There's no loyalty in love or chow lines. When you finally curl up in your sleeping bag later, you can still taste the cinnamon. Or was it fly? And you fall asleep planning what you'll eat when you get home. Maybe stew like your grandmother made. Maybe it's just a sandwich, but with real mayo, real tomatoes, and not a single trace of powdered anything. Food, you realize, isn't just survival out here. It's sanity. It's memory. It's a promise that there's more to life than foxholes and frostbite. And on the nights you eat well, those are the nights you dream of peace. You're not on the front lines anymore, for now. The war's winding down, sort of. Maybe. But instead of peace and pancakes, you've landed in a prisoner of war camp. Not as a prisoner, thank goodness. You're guarding it, watching over the other side's captured soldiers while trying not to fall asleep on your feet, or freeze to death, or worse, eat the food being served here. Because surprise, the food in POW camps, it's not gourmet, it's not even good. It's mostly bean-based, which is problematic, both socially and biologically. You line up in the same chow line as the prisoners, dished up rations meant to keep everyone technically alive, if not especially thrilled about it. The irony isn't lost on you. You're still getting more calories than you were in combat, but now you eat with guys who, just a few months ago, were trying to kill you. You eye each other over bowls of watery stew, neither party particularly impressed by the turn of events or the portion sizes. Food in these camps is regulated tightly. The Geneva Convention has rules: minimum calories, nutritional standards, no poison soup. Good call, Geneva. Historians still argue whether Allied-run camps followed the guidelines better than Axis-run ones. Some say yes. Others point to records of underfeeding, especially right after liberation when supply chains were barely functioning. You remember the camp cook, a big guy with a lopsided mustache and arms like ham hocks. He doesn't smile, but he always gives you an extra spoonful of potatoes. Probably because you helped him lug sacks of flour the other day and didn't complain when the rats ran across your boots. Meals here are simple. Bread, porridge, thin soups, the occasional piece of cheese that smells suspiciously like old socks. Everything comes in metal trays or dented bowls, and every bite is accompanied by the low murmur of men from every side of the war, chewing silently, lost in thought or memory. Quirky moment. One of the German prisoners turns out to be a trained baker. He offers to bake for the camp. The guards agree, under supervision, and for one glorious week, there are actual loaves of bread. Crusty, golden, warm. You'd cry, but there's no crying in uniform, only very aggressive blinking. The baker even manages a pretzel or two, shaped a little like surrender flags. One guy jokes that this is his prison pop-up bakery. You start calling it Camp Croissant. He grins once, then goes back to kneading dough like it owes him reparations. Not all food in POW camps was depressing. Sometimes locals nearby would donate leftovers. Usually root vegetables, sometimes eggs, rarely meat. You got a boiled egg once and ate it so fast you don't remember the taste, only the joy. Another time, a Red Cross parcel showed up with chocolate and canned sardines. You traded the sardines for socks. You'd make that trade again, odd. Still, there's an undercurrent of unease. Supplies are limited. Winter is cold. Tempers flare. Food fights are less about comedy and more about hunger. Guys throwing biscuits to distract others long enough to swipe a second helping. You hear stories from the German prisoners. How some of them were barely fed in Soviet camps. How others survived by eating tree bark and boiled leather. You can't help but feel something between sympathy and suspicion. War makes everyone hungry in ways food can't fix. Occasionally, discipline breaks down. You catch a prisoner stealing extra rations. Regulations say you're supposed to report it. Instead, you pretend you didn't see. Later, he slips you a hand-rolled cigarette in thanks. You don't smoke, but the gesture is strangely human. You tuck it into your pack like a souvenir from a parallel universe. One day, a shipment of Spam arrives. Cans and cans of it. Everyone gets some. You slice yours thin and fry it on a mess tin over a small flame, crisping the edges until they curl. It's greasy, salty, and weirdly satisfying. One of the prisoners watches you, clearly jealous. You share a piece. He grunts in approval. A moment later, he offers you pickled cabbage from his own rations. It smells terrible. You try it anyway. It's pungent. You both laugh. That's how it goes here. Meals become the way you communicate across silence. Not peace offerings exactly, just acknowledgments. You're alive. I'm alive. Let's not make this worse than it already is. There's a rumor going around that you'll be rotated out soon, sent home or reassigned. Guys are whispering about civilian food like it's a dream. Hamburgers, fresh milk, scrambled eggs with real butter. You imagine walking into a diner and ordering anything at all, and not eating it with a fork made from recycled bullets. But for now, it's more stew, more potatoes, more sitting in the cold, knees drawn up. Try not to think about how you've been in uniform so long that pepper now counts as a gourmet spice. You think about the baker. He's still baking, even though the flour's almost gone. His hands move automatically, practiced, precise. You wonder if, once this is over, he'll go home and do the same thing in a different kitchen. Maybe even sell pastries to people who never fired a shot. Dot. You finish your soup. It's thicker today. Maybe the cook added flour. Maybe someone just dropped a sock in the pot. Either way, it fills you up. Tomorrow there will be more of the same. Thin soup, dry bread, rumors of eggs, stories from men who once wore a different uniform but now all look just as tired. Dot, you lie back on your bunk, listening to the nighttime shuffling of boots and the occasional clink of a spoon against metal. It's not glamorous, it's not even decent, but it's food, and right now, that's enough. Dot. You close your eyes, pretending the flavor still lingers on your tongue. You taste salt and steam and a faint trace of shared humanity.